Here I have today Chris Williams. Chris Williams is host of Badass Agile, the podcast. Chris, are you here?
I'm here, Marco. Thank you for the kind introduction. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Um, would you like to take over and maybe introduce yourself?
I would love to. So, as mentioned, my name is Chris Williams, host of the Badass Agile Podcast. I started my career in tech probably back in 1993 or four. So I was around for all the big tech bubbles, harkening back to a day when computers on every desktop was not real yet. So I've been around tech for a long time. I've been around Agile for a very long time as well. And the podcast that I created was an attempt to inject different conversation into the agile space. What I saw early was your level of agile skill, how many things you know about how to do retrospectives or how to manage a backlog or how to create good tickets in Jira is possibly as important or less important, in fact, than some of the human skills that are required to manage people, manage conflict, manage leadership, manage expectations, and those components of the job that are distinctly businessy and less techy. So that's where my focus has been for most of the time. I have a year-long immersion experience for leaders called The Forge that I built out of my podcast concepts, which were largely informed by my work with ex-United States Navy SEALs, who taught me an awful lot about how extremely dedicated, passionate, courageous people conquer outcomes when the stakes are very, very high and the situation seems impossible, or at least very complex and difficult. That fascinated me, and that's where the podcast originated from, and that's where the leadership course came from. I mentioned I started my career in training, so I'm a teacher at heart. So it should be no surprise that a lot of what I do is still around course development, helping L&D learn about Agile and bring it to their organizations. And these days, my focus is less on the technical perspective, although I was a technical programmer, architect, project manager, and all those wonderful things. These days, I focus less on that. So what I'd love to do is I'm going to pop up a presentation that I have, and it's really a stock presentation around stories, but I think this is a really great time to talk about storytelling. You don't have to be an artist or creative to leverage the power of storytelling. I want to tell you why it's so important right now. In fact, it's probably never been more important. So let me share with you. I'll pop this up into presentation mode for a minute. Can someone just give me a thumbs up? Maybe Marco, tell me you can see that screen. Awesome. All right. So here's why storytelling matters. And here's why you always hear people talk about storytelling being a master skill. A lot of people will talk about the neuroscience of stories. That stuff doesn't matter. Free your mind of all of that. Here's the thing. We are stories. As human beings, we spend 9 months in a little protected space where everything is perfect and there's nothing to be done. And then all of a sudden, we're ejected into the world for the rest of our lives. Now we have to struggle and reach to develop the things that we need so that we can get the things that we want. And all of it's scary and all of it's foreign. And the only equipment that you have is that ability that's built into your DNA to grow, to stretch, and learn through struggle. And that's why stories resonate with us. In fact, that's why stories are engineered the way that they are. Every great story has a component of nice and normal, everything is safe, everything is perfect, nothing to do, and then all of a sudden something changes, and it thrusts us into opportunity or challenge or danger or upset or turmoil, and we spend the rest of the story going through little iterations of finding our way back to, hopefully, not the normal we came from, but a new normal that's even better. The reason why stories resonate with us is because that's the arc of our lives. So we can relate to it really, really easily. So what I want to teach you about today is how to make your stories do exactly that. But I want to mention why this is important first. It's not just about writing better stories for Jira. It's not just about telling stories for the sake of telling stories, let's say during a team retrospective or a team building exercise. Everything you do depends on storytelling. Case number one, if you, like folks like Jamie and others on the call, run some kind of business or run some kind of group or organization, Attracting attention and marketing what you do and the value of what you do is a story. You may have noticed that social media, especially the ones that are more popular now, like TikTok, everything is story based. Not necessarily interested in just having your photo or a video of something weird that happened on your front lawn. If all of those contributions to the social media sphere don't roll up to an interesting story, people won't follow. People won't be engaged. They won't be connected. They say, oh, look, cute squirrel. But at the end of the day, if that doesn't tell a story, there's no so what. People will eventually unfollow and stop paying attention to you. Next point, and I hate to bring this up because it's a topic of great debate on LinkedIn, but you may have noticed that Agile isn't the same as it was 5 years ago. Some of the best, the most known names in our industry are posting that they're struggling to find revenue. Stat for you. You may have seen Agile Alliance post that their conference subscriptions or their attendance, the ticket purchases, are down by 30% this year. You may not know this, but inside the training industry, sales of certification courses, Agile Scrum courses of every kind are down by 25 to 30% also. You probably know someone who is hashtag open to work right now. You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. We may not want to hear that Agile is under flux, under change, but it is. And if it is, it's up to us to do something about it. The reasons almost don't matter. I believe it's because we've blown trust. We are a bunch of very, very expensive people that maybe didn't deliver a ton of customer value, or at least didn't find a way to make that known. Whatever the case may be, Agile is not going away. Agile will always be in the toolkit of someone who helps organizations deliver stuff. So it'll never be gone. It just may not show up. It's no longer a viable strategy to sit around and wait for an agent to call you and say, I have a Scrum Master role for you. That probably will have changed forever, which means it's up to you to do a different kind of marketing. Marketing yourself, marketing the value of what you do. You need to have a story about what Agile means to the world right now. And if you're bold, you'll create a different story than the one we've been telling for the past 25 years. This is not just a mechanism for making software delivery cheaper. This could be a way of implementing experimental training in an L&D program. Agile could be a way of spending the most of our money on the most important trends or the most important products or the most important media. And we might need to teach people what we know about prioritization and MVP and disciplined execution and iterative delivery. It just may not always be in a tech room. And we may not always go by the name Scrum Master. Some of those things are certainly changing. If you want to do well into the future and you don't want to say, well, great, what do I do with all these skills, all these courses I spent money on, all the years I spent building experience, working with teams, what do I do with that? You're going to have to remarket it and learn how to tell different stories to different people so that you can continue to be viable. This is really important. And the people, I'm going to say this clearly, the people who do this properly first will win because our market's very saturated. So whoever learns how to change the story of what we do and make it fit current market conditions, current market desire, current trends will survive the easiest. And I'm living proof of that. So what I like to do now, there's all different kinds of reasons, by the way, why we tell stories. Sometimes we need to influence teams or team members to adopt a vision or adopt a way of working, and they may be initially resistant. We've all met resistance in our Agile coaching or Scrum mastering practice. But in all cases, storytelling has never been more important. Some people believe, in fact, if you go on LinkedIn, that good communication and storytelling is one of the top 10 skills that you need in 2024 and 2025. Don't forget, things are becoming more inauthentic because we have more artificial intelligence. Try this for an experiment. Go watch the post that your friends make on LinkedIn, especially if it's a long form essay-ish kind of think piece. Copy it and paste it into an AI checker. You'll be shocked how many of your friends 100% used AI to create content. That's wonderful because now we can make content faster, more frequently, but we lose something. We lose the real creativity of telling a story that connects one person to an audience. And it's that connection that moves people. All stories are based on emotion. So let me get into what a great story does. First, I think I mentioned this. Why is storytelling important? All the reasons I just mentioned, but it's also authentic. When we tell stories, especially when they're true stories, not fabricated or created stories, it instantly helps you build trust. A lot of times people ask me, Chris, how can I have more trust with my teams? Tell authentic stories, be real, share some of the things that you've gone through, especially the emotional ones. I mentioned influence, moving teammates, moving customers. If you're an entrepreneur, you need people to buy your products. Sales and marketing is storytelling, point blank. But it's not just about selling stuff. Agilists know intimately that we're constantly being forced to sell our ideas. And so convincing people to change, let's say, to take on an agile mindset, to change the way that they work, to trust their teams more, to deliver more autonomy, more trust. Those things require influence, and influence is best served up with storytelling. But also, connecting to our stories just makes life better. So you'll see why as we go through some of these slides. Keep in mind, anytime people buy things, whether it's physically exchanging time or money for a product or service, or if it's accepting and conscripting an idea, remember this: nobody ever buys anything for logical reasons. They buy things for emotional reasons, and they use logic and reason to back that decision up. If you think about it, it's true. Now, if you're buying Sharpies, well, I need a Sharpie. If I don't have a Sharpie, I can't draw my sticky notes, and I need to draw my sticky notes. You might think that that's a logical decision, but at the end of the day, why do you choose Sharpie as opposed to a cheaper brand, the dollar store brand or the Staples brand? Those decisions are emotional. Nobody ever buys a Ferrari because they think that on spec, it makes more sense. The mileage is terrible. The maintenance costs would buy you a Toyota Camry on an annual basis. It makes no sense. People buy Ferraris because they like being first. And more importantly, they want other people to know that they're first. That's why you buy stuff like that. So remember, people always buy for emotional reasons, not logical reasons. That becomes important because what are the crucial elements of a story? Think about your favorite stories. So drum up. I do this in the course, Elevate, my storytelling course, but let me walk you through a couple of examples. In order for a story to grab you, for you to say, man, that's a great story, whether that story is Star Wars or Harry Potter or Jaws or something else, whatever your favorite book, movie happens to be, I want you to recognize that each of them contain the following elements. Number one is motion. You go from a relatable normal to someplace different. If you think about, I don't know how many of you have seen Glenn Ross, for example. It's a movie from, I think, the 90s, based on a play. And it starts out with a bunch of salespeople who are kind of average, kind of lazy, bad attitudes, but every day is the same as the last one. They get up, they come in, customers waste their time. There's no good leads. They're shuffling down the street trying to find places to sell their stuff. All of a sudden, someone comes in from head office and says, "You guys suck. You're not salespeople. I'm a salesperson. This month, the top seller wins a Cadillac. The bottom seller loses their job." And then he leaves. Alec Baldwin plays the part in the movie. He never comes back. He's only in that first scene. Something changes in that moment. People all of a sudden are very scared that they're going to lose their job. In fact, they're very angry that their jobs have been threatened. And so begins a transition. In the movie Finding Nemo, every day is the same as the last. Father and son swimming around, but always very cautious. Stay away from danger. Stay close to me so I know where you are. And dad has a good reason for that. But the point is, every day is the same as the last until something changes. And when something changes, the father is forced to change because he loses his son, even if only for a little bit. Now, of course, everything turns out great in the end, but without that motion, going from here to there There is no story. Luke Skywalker in the first movie goes from being a kid on a farm to a hero of the Rebel Alliance. The thing is, that's not the real story. The real transformation, the real motion for Luke is going from someone who doesn't believe he belongs hanging out with heroes. He's not sure he has the stuff that's required to play a part in taking on the Empire. And the whole movie is about that journey. It's hard to see, but it's there. In the beginning, Ben Kenobi has to fight his fights for him. But by the time he gets to the Death Star moment, Obi-Wan is gone. And so what he learns is the stuff that he needs is inside him. Shut your computer off, Luke. You don't need it. Take your shot. And he does. And that's the transformation in Star Wars. So when we tell stories, we always have to introduce that motion. Without that motion, story's no good. So if you're thinking about creating a story, and we'll talk about the different kinds of stories in a moment, you might be telling the story of you, your history, your background. Well, I told the story about how I came to be a podcaster and what influenced me. So I went from a place of being, I'm in the tech world, but I'm bored. I was jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, learning all the new programming languages. I was there when HTML 1.0 came out, the first iterations of the web, when Visual Basic became popular, when COM objects were popular, database objects were popular. All of a sudden, XML came out, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm not interested in chasing new tech anymore. And so the question comes up, well, who am I? What do I do? When Agile came around, it was an opportunity to do so much more than code, but to create solutions that were valuable to customers. Chris, help us. And if you look at the early part of my career, by the way, I started out teaching operating systems. Nobody knew what Windows was. And so when I taught people Windows, it was like being a doctor. They're like, Chris, thank you. We couldn't understand any of this. We're reading the manual. We just didn't get it. And you made it so clear for us. And I realized that the reason I was put on this earth was to help people make that connection. And so the programming languages that I knew didn't matter. I could create that connection. I could create that relief for people, that sense of autonomy and power that came from mastering a technology or mastering something new is what I was born to do. So I went from being someone who was completely misaligned in my career, doing stuff I liked and I was good at, but wasn't fulfilling. Fast forward to now, I do what I want every day. I love what I do every day. And what I do is speak to folks such as yourselves about topics like this. So there's a motion there. There's a transformational motion. The second thing that it has to have is emotion. What did you feel before and after? When you're writing a story, you can say, okay, I'm a person who is good at tech and I work at it, but I feel bored. I feel discontent. I feel unfulfilled. I feel like I'm living a lie. Those are all emotions. Fast forward to now, what's the new emotion? It's not just that I'm doing a different job. That's wonderful. It's not that I moved to a different city. That's wonderful. It's what emotions do you now have access to that you didn't before? Think of Harry Potter. In the first episode, the first Harry Potter movie, Harry is a kid who what? Well, he's got some magic in his DNA. That's great. But if you think about Harry, Harry is a kid who lost the only two people in the world who believed in his gift unconditionally, unquestionably. He lost them, his parents, they died. And in fact, the people who were charged to take care of him wanted to hide that light. They didn't want anyone to see it. So they literally kept the kid under the stairs. Imagine what it would feel like to have people so envious and so mistrustful of your gift that they just want to throw a towel over it so nobody else can see it. Imagine how that would feel being a kid. And then all of a sudden one day an invitation comes to go to whatever the name of the magic school is. And that invitation, they try to rip it up, they try to throw it in the garbage, they try to burn it. It's undeniable. When that invitation comes, Harry goes to be the person that he was meant to be. In spite of the fact, in spite of all of the people who didn't want him to become it because they were scared of what that would mean about themselves. Isn't that a metaphor for the real world? Have you ever had people who tried to keep your light down because when you shine, it would have meant in their minds that they were somehow less. Can you relate to that story? Can you relate to the emotion of that story, being the kid who's trapped under the stairs and you almost get to the point where you think you deserve it for some reason, and then your undeniable invitation comes and you get to become who you were meant to be. Now, the next part that every great story must have is stakes. When you write a story, there has to be a reason to accept that invitation. Luke Skywalker could have said, "Nah, I'm good. I was just going to stay here, work the farm." And in fact, he tried that, didn't he? I think it was Ben Kenobi who said, "I knew your dad, and not for nothing, he was a pretty good fighter. You should maybe, we could use your help." And he's like, I got to go work the evaporators, though. I got some droids I got to go clean. Let me go do that. And it's only when he goes home in that moment and his home's been destroyed by the Empire that he's like, well, I have no reason to stay here. The stakes, if you don't go, what will happen? If you don't accept that invitation, what will happen? Not only would the Empire have won the war, but Luke would have never got the chance to find out if he had the stuff required to be a hero, which is his journey in that movie. So anytime that you're telling a story where there's a transformation, there's motion and emotion of going from this state to that state. An unfulfilled developer who kind of likes tech but doesn't really love what he does. A aspiring Jedi with some of the Force in his DNA. A kid with some magic in his DNA who doesn't really know his worth. Moving from those states to the state of fulfilled, to the state of becoming a hero, to the state of becoming the magician he was meant to be, that transformation has to have stakes in it. If it's obvious, yeah, he goes to training school. Why not? He goes to magic school, I mean. There has to be stakes. If you don't do this, Luke, the Empire will win and you'll never get to find out what kind of person you are, what you're made of. Now, here's the thing. Once you've established that there's a decision, what they call an inciting moment, an opportunity to go from where you are to where you're supposed to be, the next thing that has to happen is you got to fight for that end goal, for that fulfillment, for that realization of the inner hero. It's not, you couldn't make a movie about a person who's struggling every day and things really suck. So he buys a lottery ticket, wins the lottery, now has $50 million. And the rest of the movie is about how great it is to spend money on stuff and not have to worry about money anymore. No. That's not an interesting movie. Because remember, as people, we are stories. The minute you're born, you got to learn how to take those wobbly legs and turn them into things that you can stand on and then run on. You have to learn how to find your own food. You have to learn how to develop your intellect, your sense through experience. And all of it requires fumbling and falling and tearing muscle and bumps and bruises and unpleasant experience and failures. We know this from Agile. As Agilists, we should know this stuff. So there must be tension and struggle on the way to becoming who you were meant to be. Here's another thing that I want you to remember, and I'm running through all these in order. We'll get into some more colorful examples in a minute, but it's not enough to just tell a story. I was born, I did this, school came easy to me, so I got accepted into Harvard, so I went to Harvard and I got my degree, and then I thought, oh, maybe you should get an MBA at the end. That's not an interesting story. Why? There's no real motion, there's very little emotion, there's no stakes, there's no tension and struggle. You didn't tell me how you had to fight against procrastination or imposter syndrome to get that degree or to get accepted in the first place. And in almost every instance, you should start with the theme. This will become important when we talk about stories that are not you trying to write a book or a movie or a play. The theme is, what's this really about? Star Wars is not about good defeating evil. It's about Luke's quest for becoming a person he's not sure he is equipped to be. A hero, a leader, all of those things. In the beginning of the movie, he's very whiny and very uncertain. And for him to get to where he gets, the leader of the squad, the formation that goes in to fight the Death Star, the one who ultimately drops the bomb that blows up the evil Empire's little station there. That's one heck of a transformation. That's the theme of the story. Harry Potter, once again, is not about a kid learning to be a magician. It's about letting your light shine even when the world tries to keep it quiet. Those themes are things we can all relate to, and we love hearing those stories. Finally, it's all triggered by something called the inciting moment. Any piece of fiction, if you watch a movie tonight on Netflix, if you think about your favorite book, if you think about your favorite play, even your favorite comedy sketch, there's a moment where we go from normal and comfortable and predictable to being thrust into a world of opportunity, a world of stakes, a world of tension and struggle on the way to becoming who you were meant to be. That moment is different in every story, but it's usually in the first couple of beats. If you don't introduce the inciting moment in the first 15 minutes of a movie, it won't work, it won't sell, and the producers will literally change it and rearrange it. If it doesn't happen in the first verse of a song, the first 2-3 lines, it won't work. You won't stay tuned. Same thing with a show. If by the first commercial you haven't introduced the inciting moment, people will lose interest and they won't come back after the commercial. So the inciting moment is critically important. The moment where there's a decision. I have to do something. I have to change. I have to act. Nemo's dad loses Nemo. I have to do something. I can't just sit here and wait for him to come home. I must act. And when I act, I'm probably going to have to change my opinions on fear and safety and danger and all those things. Same thing with Luke. The moment that his family and his home have been destroyed, he has to go. It's not a question. In Glengarry Glen Ross, the moment the big shot comes in and says, get better or you're fired. You're not as good as you think you are. If you want to survive, the game begins now. The minute he leaves, that's the inciting moment. That's where the entire arc of the story changes. There's a plan for a heist, a little bit of larceny. All of David Mamet's plays have a little bit of a scheme or a scam in them somewhere. And that's where that starts forming. Every great movie, go watch the classics. I don't care who wrote it. That inciting moment is critical. So when you tell stories, you have to learn to build in the and then or and suddenly or in that moment, ... Because without it, your story is probably just a recounting of sequential events, which is not what we want. So I'm going to take a moment to pause before we get into how to deploy all this stuff. Do we have some interesting questions? Or are these all favorite foods still?
I'm looking at the chat and there's nothing in there.
Okay. If
My
anyone has
video is off.
Which video is off?
Mine.
Okay. If anyone has a question at this moment, something, this little chin scratcher based on what you've heard so far, let me know what it is.
I'm checking.
We'll give it like 30 seconds and then I'll go on to the next bit.
If you want to come up and ask a question, do.
Okay, let's move on. So what are the stories that I could be telling? There's a couple of really prominent ones. I always like to tell the story when, remember, I run the Forge. So one of the things I have to do very quickly is build trust with my students that in a year I can get them transformed to the level where they can't recognize the person they used to be. So I almost always start off with a story to tell a bit about my background. Now, I'm going to give you a really condensed version of a story. It doesn't begin with once upon a time. It doesn't start with one day I was sitting in the living room, ... Let me tell you a very, very quick story. I think it's probably 40 words or less. When I was 28, my father told me he was proud of me for the first time. When I was 30, I found out that he had a family I knew nothing about, and I had 4 brothers and sisters I'd never met. When I was 33, he was gone, like he died. And that made me realize that my entire life up to that, my parents kept that from me. They kept that a secret from me. And so the first 30 years of my life was my mother being upset about something that had nothing to do with me spilling the peas or me not paying attention or me slouching or whatever. It was about my father was on a business trip that wasn't a business trip. He was going to see his first family. in a time before pagers and cell phones and all those other things, that would have been terrifying for her. What I got out of that was a very important skill. I'm an astute reader of human emotion. I can tell the things that are going on inside of people without them telling me. That's a useful skill, because imagine if somebody at an executive meeting is very, very upset, very, very gruff. I can tell when they're upset because an idea that I presented is wasting their time versus they're having a bad day. Something happened and this just isn't a really great time to discuss a new initiative or to gain support. That helps me adapt and change the way I navigate people so that I can almost always come up with a successful outcome. Reason I tell that story is I want my Forge members to know I can already see you. And I know what it's going to take to help you. There's no such thing as a situation I haven't seen before. And I see you. That's important for my students because they're throwing a lot of trust at me. So that's an example of a story that I tell that doesn't have a beginning and a middle and an end, does it? It starts off with the inciting moment. When I was 28, I heard that I was, my father told me he was proud of me for the first and only time. That's a like, whoa, how come that happened? What happened to the first 28 years? So there's an inciting moment built into that. And then there's a couple of little struggles, revelations along the way. That I found out I had a family I never knew before. And then I lost my father with all those questions unanswered. Those are all struggles, but they got me somewhere. They moved me from a person who was just a kid existing in the world to someone who is a very, very great emotion sensor, which has served me as an entrepreneur. It's served me as an agile coach. It's served me as a Scrum master. So there was a question that just popped up. I'll take it now. Anonymous question. What if the story is a long struggle and then a moment of insight and action? Some stories are like that. I don't know if you have one in mind, like maybe a movie or a show that you like that would be a great example of that. But the movie never starts out with just struggle. It usually doesn't drop you. It may drop you in the middle of the action, like the middle of a car chase. But the inciting moment where something has to change usually comes in that first 15 or 30 minutes. So think about Bad Boys 2, if you've ever seen that movie. It starts with a really great car chase in the middle of a city. The car chase is over, a whole bunch of things are destroyed. The boss is very mad. You've cost the city. Beverly Hills Cop was the exact same premise and the exact same structure. So after the car chase is over, that's what hooks you. That's what gets you to rivet to your seat, put your popcorn down and start watching the movie. However, at some point, we have to introduce that inciting moment. So even though the struggle starts at the beginning, it doesn't stay struggle. In Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley has a friend who comes in from out of town with some strange bearer bonds, and all of a sudden, some gangsters come in and they unalive the dude. There's your moment of tension. Something changed that forced Axel Foley to act. So I'm not sure what movie you're referring to. If you think about World War II, violence erupted in the South Pacific. We had Pearl Harbor. And then from there, it's conflict, battle, 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 battle. That's how it went down. It doesn't make a great story. The story, my father was in World War II in the US Navy. And one of the things that he talked about is how Pearl Harbor made him decide to join the forces. Until then, it seemed like a conflict that was so far away, but until American soldiers were lost, he didn't have any kind of impetus to jump in and serve. So if you look carefully, there's no such thing as a story where it's struggle, 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 struggle. Think of The Pursuit of Happiness, for example. The inciting moment is the moment where he's required to have faith in himself. And that faith has to go a long way because the situation doesn't improve until maybe halfway through the movie, 2/3 of the way through the movie. But the inciting moment is still shifting from despair to hope and positivity and certainty and action. So again, if you gave me an example, I could maybe help you find it. But the best way to tell the story about a very long struggle that ends up in victory is to tell the stories of why did people choose to fight rather than to quit. Those make great stories. How are we doing on time, guys?
We've got another 18 minutes left. Thank you for answering that question. I'll ask the person to actually, if they have anything to bounce on that, and let you know. We do have another question if you want that.
I love it. Does body language play a part in storytelling? For example, mirroring to build trust and comfort in the conversation. Everything that you do vocally, in terms of facial expressions, micro expressions, and body language matters. Here's the thing. You can't fake any of those things. You can try, like you can learn to mirror. If somebody leans in, you lean in too. The easiest way to get great body language, great intonation, great micro expressions is to care about the person across from you. Just care, be interested, be focused and interested, fascinated. Marco, how did you end up back in France? I'm dying to hear this. And as soon as he starts telling the story and he goes, well, it sort of started when I was in, and I'll be like, really? You'll start mirroring automatically, not the other way around. One of the problems that we have with so many books and so many techniques about how to influence and connect with people is that they get it backwards. They say, do all these things so that you can have the connection. The actual mechanism works like this. Make the connection and you'll do all the right things. Simple, simple, simple. So does it matter? Yes. Do you have to go and get a special certificate in mirroring and matching and all those things? No. I have a course called Rivet the Room, where if you want to know from a performer's perspective, I was born and raised a musician, pitch, pace, pause, and volume. Focus on varying those things to create interest. Those are like little levers you can mechanically play. But again, if the story's in here, those things will show up. Do you notice what I just did there? Pause. If the story's in here, then everything will take care of itself. Like you can learn to manipulate those things, but the easiest way to do it is to take the emotion of the story and bring it in here. Did it resonate with anyone? Did anyone here have a father who never told them they were proud of them? If so, that story rings with you. Did anyone find out that your family had a deep, dark secret later in life and it completely rearranged the way you see the world? That story will resonate with you. Take the story and bring it in here. So the next question is how to make a non-personal someone else's story authentic. So if you have a friend who went through something, and I have a ton of examples of stories that I use about my friends, then again, the secret is to bring that story in here. We always talk about empathy as agile coaches, but I think a lot of times, and Scrum Masters, a lot of times I think we think that means sympathy. Oh, things are hard. Okay, I get it. You don't have to do your bit today. You don't have to come to the stand-up. That's not empathy. Empathy is understanding what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. So if you have a friend who has a story, an incredible story about how they went from rags to riches or riches to rags, or they went from being a dental hygienist with people spitting on them and throwing things at them, or a nurse who was tired of being abused during the COVID pandemic and they decided to quit and become a Scrum Master. If that story resonates with you, think about why. What's the motion? What's the emotion? The emotion is, here's a person who hates what they do every day. All they want to do is serve. They got into this business of nursing because they wanted to help people, to heal people. They're healers. And they found the world just wasn't ready for that gift. It no longer was meaningful for them in that construct. So they said, where else can I serve? And they found the Scrum Master job. And all they heard is, when you're a Scrum Master, you serve teams, you serve customers, you serve companies. It's a wonderful job. All you do all day is make things better for people. And my friend said, I want some of that. That's who I am. That's what I do. So can you take that story and connect with the emotion of it? Sure. Your job is to go find it. What is the what's the emotion? Where did they go from? Where did they go to? And what are the emotions or the feelings associated with that? Helpless, despairing, unable to heal and help the way I want to, unfulfilled, to having a blast every day, loving my job, never working a day in my life. You could use that story. When would you use that story? Anytime you need to help people understand or relate to, hey, sometimes where you start isn't where you finish. Sometimes you got to make big changes in your universe to find your why. Let me tell you the story about a friend of mine who used to be a nurse, ... That's a great question. Can the call to action...
Hang on a minute. Yeah, we're jumping questions. It's okay, Chris. We have a couple of questions. We have 13 minutes left. Do you still have things to present?
Not as much. You know what? Let me present real quick in 5 minutes.
Okay, and then we'll take the questions, yeah?
Then we'll take the questions at the end. Yeah. So how do you deploy this in your daily life? I would sit down every day, and I do, and just write, fill a page up. I dictate if I don't have time. So, for example, if you knew how much time I spent in creative mode, you'd be like, where do you find the time for that? My business is storytelling. If I can't tell stories, I can't sell my products, I can't make proposals, I can't sell my ideas, I can't influence people. So for me, it's critically important. But in the beginning, you say, Chris, I don't have 1 to 3 hours to spend writing stories in a day. Then get out I have one of these dictation things in every room in my house. See if I have it. A little dictaphone. I have one of these in every room in my house. It's in my travel bag. I have one in my car. And just think about what are some of the stories, maybe the stories that you've been through, stories of your team, stories of your career, stories of your upbringing, stories of your childhood, stories about loss, stories about learning. Just document stuff. Think and document with a pen, with a keyboard, with a dictaphone like this, or with the voice recorder on your smartphone. There's no excuse not to just throw stories down. I think I learned this skill because as a podcaster, I don't interview people much. I tell stories every week. I pick a topic and I jam on it for 10 minutes. That requires a commitment to the creative craft. Why do we do this? So that you have an inventory, a bucket of stories that at the right moment, if you've shaped it well, you know how to take it and apply it to any customer problem that may come up. You have a teammate who's unhappy, who feels threatened by your presence or the change that Agile represents, got a story about change for you. So there's those stories, the stories that will help your team, help your company. Then there's the stories that will help your customers. Yeah. Believe it or not, every product that you work on as an Agile coach or Scrum Master is a story. What do you mean? If you make products that have stakeholders or users inside the organization or outside, you are helping people realize their story. People don't buy things for logic and reason. They buy them for emotion. They're trying to go somewhere. I buy this handbag and I feel like I'm one of the chosen ones. I buy this little gadget and I feel like now I have the tools that I need to do the meaningful things I want to do. Those are the emotions that customers go through too. Don't forget that. A customer is someone who wants to go from here to here, from uncertain to certain. Think about it. The easiest way to sell Agile is to say, I will take you from delivery uncertainty to delivery certainty. You'll know what you're going to get, when you're going to get it, roughly speaking, how much it will cost, when to stop doing it, when is it adding value, when is it not, and the things that we don't know, we'll learn through experimentation. That's how we sell Agile. We're taking customers from delivery uncertainty to certainty. So if you spend some time documenting your stories, you get very, very good at what's the hook, what's the inciting moment, what's the beginning, middle, end, what's the ongoing tension, what are the stakes, and what's the conclusion. Therefore, what is the motion, the emotion, and what's this really about? So whether you're making stories to tell the story of you, like the one that I told you, whether you're trying to inspire and ignite a customer or trying to bring an idea to the ground that the executive maybe has to sign off on. And in this case, the story is not about you. It's about the customer. It's about the person you're serving. What will the world be like after we implement Agile? What will the world be like after we create a center of excellence? What will the world be like after ... And this is why it's so important, because I want you all to start thinking about what is the story of Agile now that it has changed. Could you start thinking about your place in a changing business landscape? Stop thinking about Agile as a thing that's valuable because it exists. Here, have some Agile. Why? Because Agile's good. That's no longer a good enough reason. What matters now, and I can tell you this from experience, is what value do you bring to an organization? What are you struggling with? Chris, we're losing our people left, right, and center. We don't understand what happened. Chris, we're losing customers all over the place. A new competitor came in. AI is replacing everything. Let me tell you about how what I do, our way of delivering outcomes, can help you. So we no longer have to tell the story about Jira and tickets and software features. We can tell the story about moving towards an outcome that it's not for me, it's for you, my friend. You as my customer. Let me help you with that problem. Revenue's too low. Let me work on it with you. We're losing too many people. Let's set up a measurement. Let me work on that with you. And we'll use agile techniques to do it. So whether you're telling the story of you to build trust or interest amongst your tribe, your team, or whether you're speaking to your customer and trying to tell them the story of what it's going to feel like when they have that delivery certainty, when they take that new course, when they buy that book, this is where you look for opportunities to tell a story that's not just facts, but motion, emotion, stakes, the moment, the inciting moment, the moment of change, the struggle, and then hopefully the outcome, which is the positive change or the result of positive change. If I had to finish, let's see, stories are crucial, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, good point. There's no such thing as new stories, by the way. Don't be afraid to take a story arc like Star Wars, which is called The Hero's Journey. You can look it up. Also, I want to say it is Aristotle's Poetics. He introduces the idea of a 3-act structure, and it goes like this. Anytime you want to tell a story, easiest way to implement everything I just told you is chase your hero up a tree. That's Act 1. Number 2, Act 2, throw rocks at them. That's your struggle and your conflict and your toil and your stretching and your learning. And then in Act 3, get them down. That's all there is to a story. But without those beats, without the motion, the emotion, the conflict, the struggle, the stakes, and the bigger theme, the stories lack flavor. So go check out some Netflix, read your favorite books, listen to an audiobook, right? Listen to a TED Talk. Why do those things move you and influence you? Because they follow that structure. We are all stories. If you honor that structure, your stories will instantly become better. So I'm going to take some questions in a moment. I have a product for you called Elevate. The link will be at the end of the slideshow. I have a discount for you. If you use the code, sorry, that's not supposed to say 35, it's 25, but if you use the code SMOTU25, it's 25% off. If you have problems using the code or need anything, you can reach me at chris@badassagile.com. The links will be in I think it's in the slideshow.
In the chat.
Awesome. So with that, I want to thank you for your kind attention, but I'm excited to spend some time on some questions. So Marco, do you want to feed them to me so I don't miss any?
Yeah, we've got 5 minutes left. Thank you for all this. I don't know if you took a question actually just whilst you was last presenting, but let's go through them. Vicky, she actually asked a question quite some time ago, about 10 minutes. Does the story have to end in a victory?
No. Some stories are cautionary tales. Right? So sometimes we tell the story about the person who didn't leap, who didn't try, who didn't stretch, who didn't take on agile. And here's what happened. Most marketing, by the way, is based on pain. Yeah. So marketing, I can't get you to buy stuff unless I make you discontent with the status quo, or I strike enough fear into you that you take the action that I want you to take. Sounds awful, but that's how marketing works. It's like, don't be the person without the handbag, because look at what happened to them. So not every story has to end in victory. Empire Strikes Back ends on a very, very down note. The whole trilogy ends on an up note, but that movie ended with a lot of confusion and uncertainty. And that's okay. That's an emotional journey too. Not everything has to end happy.
Great.
I'm going to give you a great example. There is I want to say 7 or 8 word story. Some people attribute it to Hemingway, but it's not true. You ready? Here goes the story. For sale. Baby shoes. Never worn. Not a lot of words, but boy, does that ever strike an emotion. For sale. Ooh, I love a good sale. What's for sale? Tell me more. Baby shoes. Aw, I love babies. Your shoes are so cute. What else? Never worn. What happened to that baby? Like, that's not a nice ending, but it does raise some curiosity, doesn't it? It would be a way to drag you in, asking questions. So no, not everything has to happen on an up note. Great question.
Okay. Would you like another one?
Oh, please. Yeah, keep them coming.
Yeah. Carl asked a little bit a while ago, can the call to action be the start of the story?
It can, but the call to action is insignificant if there's no normal. See, because the struggle that's about to follow is usually based on a character flaw. Finding Nemo, the dad is a worrier. He's overprotective. He has a reason to be overprotective, but the story is about letting go of that overprotectionism, because if you don't, your child will never grow. So if I don't tell you what normal looks like, the call to action will be somewhat meaningless, because one person's call to action is another person's every day. Inherent in the call to action, chasing your hero up a tree, we want to know what your weaknesses are, because that's what makes the story interesting, is fighting against and overcoming those weaknesses to get to the outcome, to get you down from the tree. So it can come very early, but it's usually not the first thing. Some stories tell it out of sequence, like Pulp Fiction style, right, where the inciting moment is scene one. But if I don't tell you the story of the character some point, if there's no background, the whole thing won't hang together. There'll be a lot of, people leaving the theater saying, I don't get it. And that's not what you want. At the end of the book, end of the movie, end of the song, you want your audience to feel satisfied, or they'll never come back and listen to another one of your stories. I hope that answered your question.
I've asked them in the actual chat. That's a great. I love that film, Pulp Fiction. It
Mhm.
does. It shows you that initial start. And you don't know what's going on, and then suddenly it changes to a scene, and it doesn't tell you. It was like I don't think it actually tells you 6 months beforehand. It just
Yes.
actually goes through a story, and then all of a sudden at the end you connect all the dots, and it's great.
Yes.
Um, Great gem. The customer is the story is a connection. We don't have any other questions. I think I've got through them all.
Okay, good. Any
And
others?
it's time.
Very good. That worked out well.
It did. Great
I
gem.
want
The
to
customer is
thank
a
you.
story.
Thank you all for showing up today. Thank you for having an interest in something that, in my experience, if you become a great storyteller, you know, agile people sometimes come up from the development world, and so they tend to be those right-brained analytical folks. But many of us do agile now because we want to make impact. And knowing that storytelling can be a powerful tool in generating that impact means that I hope this will create a different kind of fulfillment for you. If you're bored of the task of attending stand-ups and documenting retrospectives, and you're looking for the deeper meaning in what we do, it's the ability to create impact by telling the stories of our victories and our failures to help our teams get better, to help our customers and stakeholders get closer to where they're trying to go. And adding this creative element to your everyday, I think we need it now more than ever. So I hope you love it. Do check out the course. If you have any questions for me offline, don't hesitate to reach out. When you use the course, by the way, there's live sessions, so you can bring your story examples and have me critique them and help you shape them. So this is a skill you want to bring under your tool belt. You can imagine how it's helpful looking for a new job, telling your story in an interview. When you make those stories more compelling, it changes the world. So thank you again for having me, Scrum Masters of the Universe. I appreciate being here. Wonderful to spend time with you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. This was actually a wonderful session. Lots of engagement in the chat. We really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed you bringing this subject. We would love to have you back at some point, whenever. So do reach out. And yes, thank you, audience. Thanks you for joining us and showing your support. And well, all I can say is have a great day and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. And Marco and everybody, thank you for your support and your help today.